Every inch Russia takes in Ukraine comes at a brutal cost. Tanks burn, assault squads disappear, and entire offensives grind to a halt with the smallest patch of ground. Because Ukraine has turned itself into something almost impossible to swallow: a steel porcupine. A country bristling with drones, missiles, mines, layered defenses, and a military that's learned how to punish every advance. Push forward and the quills come out. Every step hurts. Every breakthrough attempt becomes a bloodbath. That's why Russia is bleeding for every inch. And the idea behind this strategy comes from one of nature's most deceptively dangerous animals: the porcupine. These small rodents would be easy prey for all sorts of predators, from owls and eagles to bobcats, wolves and coyotes, if not for the iconic quote of quills that cover their bodies. These hardened hairs provide the porcupine with one of the most powerful natural defense mechanisms Mother Nature ever invented. Each creature can have more than 30,000 of them in total. Sharp, stiff and barbed, they detach easily from the porcupine's body, digging into any predator that gets too close. They make porcupines difficult for any larger creatures to consume, while also providing a clear visual deterrent, discouraging predators from even attempting to attack them. This in turn allows porcupines to survive and thrive, even in areas where much larger and stronger creatures may roam. In the same vein, the steel porcupine strategy is designed to help Ukraine ward off attackers and withstand invasions, even when facing up against much larger enemies like Russia. The core concepts of this strategy are quite simple. Rather than focusing on projecting power outwards and enhancing its offensive capacities, the country in question, in this case Ukraine, focuses instead on maximizing its defenses, building its quills in the form of dense defensive weapons, layered anti-air systems, hardened infrastructure, and strong civilian resistance capabilities. The end goal isn't to actually defeat a large invading force or aggressor, but to make the very prospect of invading so difficult, so expensive, and so painful that they don't want to do it in the first place. In short, it's about deterrence. The porcupine's quills deter predators from coming too close to it, encouraging them instead to seek out easier, less protected prey elsewhere. The steel porcupine strategy follows that same idea, making a country so fortified that any would-be aggressors are forced to think twice about attacking it. It's simple in theory, but to actually put this strategy into action can involve years, even decades of effort. Because a country that wants to cement itself as a steel porcupine needs to develop and deploy a vast, interconnected array of defenses. That can include anti-access and aerial denial assets like missiles, mines, and drones, as well as asymmetric warfare equipment like portable anti-tank missiles and man-portable air defense systems, or MANPADS. These countries also need to level up their border defenses, setting up everything from hardened bunkers and prepared ambush zones to fortified supply lines. What's more, modern-day steel porcupines also need to be ready for attacks on all fronts, with the latest and greatest cyber defenses and electronic warfare equipment to fend off unseen assaults. And they need their people, not just their armies, but their civilians too, to be ready, willing, and able to stand up and defend their territory if and when a crisis situation comes along. Putting all of those different puzzle pieces into place is an enormous challenge, even at the best of times. Now, imagine having to do it in the middle of a war, when you're already having to fend off a larger opponent and deal with daily assaults, drone strikes, and frontline bombardments. That's what Ukraine had to do. Any military analysts would have called it an impossible task. Yet, as we've seen time after time, for Ukraine, nothing is impossible. From day one of this war, Kyiv's forces proved that they were capable of far more than Russia and the rest of the world gave them credit for. Naturally, they struggled in the early stages. They suddenly found themselves facing off against one of the world's biggest and strongest armies. Russian troops marched over the borders of Ukraine in 2022 from multiple directions, steamrolling towards major towns and cities with the express intent of wiping out any resistance in their way. Many of those troops were later found to have packed parade uniforms. They weren't gearing up for a grinding long-term war. They thought they'd be partying on the streets of Kyiv in a matter of days, that their so-called special military operation would be over and done with in no time at all. Many in the West also doubted Ukraine's ability to defend itself, And that only made things harder for the Ukrainian armed forces, who desperately needed aid and supplies from other nations, but consistently had to wait to get any sort of serious help. Indeed, back in those early stages, Western countries were so concerned about the risk of potentially escalating the situation, it made them extremely wary about providing weapons, armor, or defensive systems. In early 2022, Germany, for example, infamously offered Ukraine not tanks, missiles, or air defenses, but a few thousand helmets. It was only weeks into the war, when Ukraine had defied expectations and Russia had failed to achieve the rapid victory that so many predicted, that Western support started to scale up. Even then, aid often came with caveats. Time and time again, Kyiv was forced to wait while weapons shipments were delayed, disrupted, or scaled down. As the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, put it during his speech at the Munich Security Conference in February 2026, "We're thankful for every delivery, but HIMARS took months, tanks took months, jets took years. We cannot afford to lose a single day." Equipment eventually arrived, but often in limited quantities, poor condition, or with strict strings attached. Many countries forbid Ukraine from using their weapons on Russian soil, for example, limiting Kyiv's options when it came to planning counterattacks against its aggressor. Russia, meanwhile, made the most of the West's hesitancy. Its president, Vladimir Putin, made regular threats, publicly announcing his intentions to strike back at any nation that dared intervene in his special military operation. Meanwhile, his troops pushed on, intensifying their aggression and seizing their chance to steal as much land as they could. Ukraine was trapped, constrained, facing near insurmountable odds, but still somehow it endured. It withstood the immense tests and challenges of those early months, surviving one year of war after another, and it's still standing today. Russia, meanwhile, continues to toil. Its forces move at a snail's pace, its assault squads are repeatedly routed, its gains are minimal, and its prospects are increasingly grim. This, despite having almost every conceivable advantage on its side from the very start of the war. Unlike Ukraine, Russia didn't have to worry about defending its territory from multiple axes of attack. It didn't have to deal with unreliable allies and aid delays. It instead was able to spend a small fortune on Shahed drones from Iran, and even got help from the Iranian military to design and develop those drones at its own factories. Another ally, North Korea, also gave Russia munitions, labor, and even boots on the ground, while China and India continued to invest heavily in Russian resources, with the former also providing all-important dual-use components that the Kremlin needed to continue maintaining its enormous armor fleet and manufacturing drones, bombs, and missiles in enormous quantities. Russia had everything going its way for a very long time. Yet, it experienced one dismal failure after another, embarrassing itself on the global stage and undermining the long-running myth that its military was still as mighty and formidable as the iconic Red Army of the Soviet Union. As one Ukrainian commander, Anatoly Kachenko of the 92nd Separate Assault Brigade notes, "In 4 years, the USSR defeated Germany. In 4 years, the Russians have only managed to take half of Donetsk region." It's a startling but entirely accurate assessment of Russia's utter failure and Ukraine's astonishing success. And it all boils down to not only Russia's incompetence, but also Kyiv's miraculous ability to adapt, to build, and strengthen its steel porcupine strategy, while simultaneously fending off near constant attacks and bombardments. But before we dig any deeper into that, if this is the kind of insight you want more of, make sure you're subscribed to The Military Show. We break it down like this every week. Now, Ukraine didn't manage to defend itself through sheer grit alone, and it certainly didn't manage it through superior resources or a bigger budget than its opponent. Instead, it was all about adaptation. Right from the start, Kyiv's forces had to think outside the box. They had no other choice. As Barbey, a deputy commander in the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade's Unmanned Systems Battalion puts it, the country had to resort to a poor man's solution of taking simple commercial hobby drones and converting them into disposable weapons and scouting tools. That seemingly simple move changed everything. All of a sudden, with eyes in the skies far and wide across its territory, Ukraine not only enjoyed a constant and stable stream of intelligence, but also made it almost impossible for its enemy to do anything without them knowing about it. This, in effect, became the first line of defense in Ukraine's steel porcupine strategy. Cheap and relatively rudimentary unmanned aerial vehicles formed a formidable drone wall, which Russia has since struggled to bypass. Because not only were those drones scanning the surroundings and providing valuable data to ground units, but they were also used to strike back at the enemy, targeting the weak points of tanks, armored vehicles, and personnel carriers, wiping out Russia's armor advantage one asset at a time. Now, years into the conflict, Ukraine has the means to produce literally millions of these drones, and Russia for once has had to adapt. Instead of continuing to deploy strong tank columns and other armor over the border, it's resorted to deploying infantry-only assault squads, sending dozens of men to their doom without armor of any kind to cover or support them. It's a suicidal strategy, and the stats back it up. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, notes that since the start of the invasion, Russia has suffered well over 1 million casualties, far more than in any war since World War II. In fact, it's lost far more men in this one conflict than in all of the wars it's participated in since the end of the Second World War. Putin might argue that those deaths are all worthwhile, if Russia was actually making serious gains on the ground, capturing towns and cities with ease and swiftness. But it isn't. The CSIS report goes on to note that Russia's campaign of conquest is moving at a veritable snail's pace, with an average rate of between 15 and 70 meters per day in their most prominent offensives, slower than almost any major offensive campaign in any war in the last century. Despite all their modern technologies and knowledge, Russia's troops are gaining ground slower than the Allied forces in World War I, and they're dying in greater and greater numbers with every passing month, because the steel porcupine is getting stronger. Ukraine doesn't just have more drones than ever before, it also has a greater variety of unmanned vehicles at its disposal, ranging from simple scouting units to far larger bombing drones, capable of taking out enemy weapons plants and ammo stocks. With so many options, Russia is finding it increasingly difficult to defend against them. Its troops never know what sorts of weapons might be headed their way. One Russia war correspondent summed up the grim state of affairs facing his country's forces in late 2025, stating that the average life cycle of a Russian assault soldier is just 12 days, and that these same soldiers only have a 50-50 chance of even making it to the front lines without being killed en route. Even those that make it to the front are inevitably doomed, sent out on suicide missions into hostile territories where Ukrainian drone crews and artillery units are simply waiting to pick them off one by one. Thanks to this, Ukraine's aim to push Russia's casualty number even higher, up to the 50,000 Russian casualties per month mark, no longer seems impossible or even excessively ambitious, but truly realistic. And if Kyiv can pull that off, Russia may very well be doomed, because it's no longer able to recruit troops in sufficient quantities to replace those that have been killed or wounded. Its army is no longer expanding, but stagnating and even starting to shrink. With fewer boots on the ground and a continued reluctance to rely on armor, Russia's offensive is only going to get slower, weaker, and more wasteful from here on out. Ukraine, meanwhile, just keeps on constructing more and more quills, more layered defenses, more ways to make Russia's invasion feel like the worst decision in the country's entire history. That doesn't only include drones, but missiles too. Throughout 2024 and 2025, Ukraine invested heavily in domestic long-range missile development, elevating its abilities to strike deep into the heart of Russia, hundreds of miles beyond its own borders. From the long Neptune to the Flamingo, Ukraine now has more powerful, far-reaching weapons to call on to deal massive damage to the Kremlin's high-value assets, including fuel depots, oil refineries, and military production plants. And it's putting those weapons to extremely good use. Bloomberg reports that over the course of 2025, for example, Ukraine orchestrated no fewer than 120 strikes on Russian energy facilities, generating a whopping 1 trillion rubles, $12.9 billion worth of damage. Now, both drones and missiles are regularly dispatched from Ukrainian launch zones, flying far into Russian territory, taking out one target after another. At sea too, Ukraine's drones and missiles have forced the Russian Black Sea Fleet into hiding, neutralizing around a third of its enemy's vessels and pushing others back. Warships, submarines, frigates, and destroyers have all been rendered utterly ineffective, giving Russia fewer and fewer options to organize its own attacks. In the air too, Ukrainian drones have brought helicopters and even fighter jets, some of which were worth tens of millions of dollars out of the air. Then there was the iconic Operation Spiderweb attack of 2025, which dealt an enormous blow to Russia's bomber fleet. Over and over, Ukraine is sending a clear message to the Kremlin: if you hit us, then we'll hit you back even harder. On top of all of this, Ukraine has also managed to massively reduce its reliance on Western allies. It still needs their support, of course, but it's dramatically more independent and capable of standing on its own 2 feet today than it was back in 2022. Indeed, since the invasion began, the Ukrainian defense sector has grown from almost non-entity into a sprawling, enormous industry, with more than 1,000 firms, most of which are private. Those companies employ hundreds of thousands of workers, and together they're providing the fuel, ammo, and systems that keep Kyiv's war machine up and running. 96% of the drones Ukraine uses today, for example, are made domestically. So are 99% of the robotic systems used by the country's military. Domestically produced 155mm Bodana artillery systems also make up around 40% of Ukraine's artillery usage along the front lines, and more than half of all the weapons used by the Ukrainian army are now made in Ukraine. The country has also developed its own extraordinary air defense network, featuring numerous missiles, launch platforms, turrets, and other assets, all bearing the Made in Ukraine label. And it's not stopping there. In 2025, Ukraine authorized over 1,300 new models of domestically produced weapons and military equipment. And there are hundreds more projects still in development, ready to unleash on Russia as and when the time is right. Kyiv has also expedited its innovation, cutting the red tape and bureaucracy that so often interferes in the military development process. Its contractors have the freedom to design and roll out new weapons and systems quickly and easily, responding to soldier feedback to improve their creations in real time. Once the war ends, all of this technology is going to be worth a fortune for Ukraine, ensuring it will have the investment, partnerships, and trade deals needed to continue maintaining and expanding its steel porcupine strategy for decades to come. In fact, countries are already lining up to learn from Ukraine's defense firms and buy up the country's world-leading drones and defensive systems. There are plans in place for 10 new Ukrainian weapons export centers all over Europe in 2026, with drone production plants also opening up in locations like Germany and the UK. Multiple German and even American companies have also announced deals with Ukrainian defense contractors to work on everything from AI-guided strike drones to unmanned ground vehicles. All of this is a testament to Ukraine's unparalleled ability to adapt. So many other countries would have buckled and broken beneath the sheer weight of Russia's vast military force. So many would have struggled to survive even the early weeks and months of a war like this, let alone several years. Ukraine has achieved something miraculous, and thanks to the steel porcupine strategy, it's ready for whatever comes next. Russia may persist with this war for months or even years to come, or Putin may eventually realize what a horrific mistake he made and attempt to broker some sort of feasible peace deal. Either way, Ukraine is prepared, not only to defend itself today, but to put itself in the strongest possible position tomorrow, the day after, and all the days that follow. With a small budget, scant resources, and a near-endless array of problems to solve along the way, it's made itself a military superpower, forging defenses that are the envy of countries across the globe. It's made its territory impossible to take, and its defensive lines impossible to breach. It's forced Russia into a position where it has to sacrifice more men, more resources, more money, and more time to take even a single sliver of land, rendering the entire war effort a grisly, grueling, and interminable slog for the Kremlin's forces. Thanks to that, Ukraine may very well win this war after all. Now, learn more about Ukraine's remarkable plan to end the war in this video, which explores Kyiv's three-stage strategy to eliminate the last few advantages Russia has left. Or check out this video to see how Ukraine is using sci-fi-style technology, including AI-powered robots, to eliminate Russian troops along the front lines. And finally, to make sure you don't miss out on more insightful analysis and detailed breakdowns just like this, subscribe to The Military Show today.